Order. Mr. President, I wanted to rise to respond to some attacks relative to my integrity which were run today in New York newspaper, I think it was the Daily News, which I presume were energized and orchestrated by the staff, if not the leadership of the Senate office of the senior senator from New York. The editorial could not have had the fact pattern it had unless it had been fed that information by, I suspect, the senior senator's staff. So I think it's appropriate to respond to it. It implies, obviously, that I am inconsistent in my views on how I approach spending in this Congress. That, I think, will come as a surprise to most people in this Congress, because I doubt that anyone in this Congress, well, no, I'm sure there are people, but my record in trying to control spending and having some resistance to spending which I feel is inappropriate is fairly strong. As chairman of the Budget Committee, I've tried to discipline spending, tried to make our government more affordable for our children, tried not to pass on to our children debts which they shouldn't have to bear, so that our children can have an opportunity to live as fulfilling a life and have as high a quality a life as we have had. Now, there is in this bill a proposal to spend $1.6 billion on a air train to Kennedy Airport. Now, that's not an aircraft issue. It's clearly an add-on. And it's ironically done, this proposal, paying for this, using the tax code in a very ingenious way. It gives a credit to the state of New York or the city for taxes which they don't pay over a period of time which is fairly extensive. I think it'll run into the period 2020. And that credit totals about $1.6, $1.7 billion. It is, under any scenario, I didn't use this term when I spoke about it first, but I'll use it now. It is, under any scenario, an earmark, and not a very good earmark, to say the least. Now, the representation is that my opposition to this is an attack on the efforts of this country to address the very serious and legitimate and appropriate concerns of the city of New York that resulted from 9/11. The people of New Hampshire and the people of this nation, after 9/11, were committed and remain committed to making sure that the city of New York was made whole to the extent it could be. Obviously, it could never be. It was such a horrific event. And we were in our state, we're happy to take our tax dollars and put them towards the city to try to redress those problems. And I voted for that. And we in our city, in our state, we're happy to support efforts to rebuild and continue to be happy to support efforts to rebuild Ground Zero. Because that is a place that has taken on sacred meaning to our nation. But we're not interested in New Hampshire, and I suspect most American citizens are not interested in using dollars which were supposed to be used for 9/11 to help out some other maybe legitimate need, but I don't know whether it is or not, in the city of New York. Building a train, I called it the train to nowhere, bit of an exaggeration, but since I was trying to put it in the context of an earmark that was of questionable purpose, that seemed like a reasonable phrase to use. I think that's sort of become like the term Xerox, you know, around here when you're talking about earmarks that have serious question to them. But building this air train to Kennedy Airport, which, by the way, I understand there's some significant disagreement within the city about whether it should even be built. But certainly it should not be on this bill as an attempt to basically get around an authorizing process or a process which would err whether or not this earmark is appropriate. It should also not use a brand new exercise in tax policy which is totally inappropriate, of basically using the tax laws in a way that creates an earmark by saying that you get a credit for a tax you don't even have to pay. That is very bad precedent. Horrific precedent, quite honestly. This earmark should see the light of day. And I don't think it can be defended on the grounds of 9/11. And in fact, I think that really does serious damage to the historic and very human perspective of 9/11. To try to defend building a train to the Kennedy Airport, an air train to the Kennedy Airport, and stand behind 9/11 as your reasoning, and then claim in a way that is most inappropriate, in my opinion, that if somebody opposes that proposal, they are attacking the memory and the purpose and the sacredness of the 9/11 and the event and the Ground Zero's reconstruction is just, even by New York standards of exaggerated politics, that's carrying it a step too far. More than a step too far, in my opinion. But that's what was done here. An earmark was created for something which has only marginal relationship to even downtown Manhattan. Now, well, I guess you've got to get there from Manhattan, so I guess it's got a relationship. But certainly no nexus here with Ground Zero from the standpoint of air tram to construction to Kennedy. Using the tax laws in an abusive way to generate this earmark. And then claiming when anybody raises the question of the legitimacy of it, that they are somehow acting in a way that is inconsistent with a commitment to the rebuilding of New York after 9/11, and that they are degrading the name of the 9/11 event is just, well, it's beyond the pale in my humble opinion. But that appears to be the goal, the style, and the approach of at least the people who fed the information to the paper, which I presume was the staff of the senior senator from New York. Now, maybe it wasn't his staff, and I'd like him to come down here and deny it if it wasn't. I'd like him to come to the floor and deny that he didn't basically give this information and set the tone of this position, because very clearly, in my opinion, he has. In fact, ironically, the plans for this train, this elevated train, were begun in 1998. And the actual commitments that this train would go forward, as I understand it, were discussed as early as 1988. So to claim that this is tied into this, to Ground Zero, is to extend credibility quite a bit, in my opinion. And to hide behind that and use it in such a personal and almost personal way, which basically questions another member's integrity, is obviously inappropriate. So I think the senator, he may have the votes to support his proposal to get this, to raid the tax code for $106 billion. Maybe he's got the votes to do that. But it shouldn't be on this bill. It's not an airplane issue. And I can tell you right now that if I have anything to say about it, this bill isn't going to move forward as long as it is on this bill. It had not been my intention to engage at this level, but hey, people from New Hampshire know how to play politics. Or we know how to deal in this chamber as well as people from New York, We may be from the country, but we know how to engage. And it appears the engagement has been called upon. And so let us go forward and see who is right.